I'm ready.
Okay.
All right.
Ready whenever you.
3, 2, 1. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for attending today's UPR event here at the United Nations Plaza, hosted by Children's Rights and JMACforFamilies. First, I want to say thank you for being here. Those who are here in person and for those of you who are online, your presence matters. Today, we don't want you to just be a spectator because we are all witnesses. Today, you will witness the reality through the conversations that we have together here at this table around what's happening to Black families who are being torn apart by a system built on racism, control, and surveillance. You will witness the U.S. government doing everything in its power to circumvent accountability. But they won't, because we the people are going to hold them accountable. We're sending a message that we will not uphold. They're sending us a message that they will not uphold basic human rights of children and families. You are witnessing the power of the people coming together to create change and to tell truths. We are activists. We are impacted people. We are parents. We are people who refuse to turn our back, ignore what's happening, and simply just walk away. Several of us on this panel today are lived experts, meaning we have experienced the harms of the family policing system, one of the main systems that we will be talking about today, although we know that that system intersects with many other systems, including the school system, the healthcare system, the incarceral system, and we can go on and on. But what I'm gonna do is get this party started. But I do wanna remind you that change doesn't start with us at this table. Change starts with all of us. Look in the mirror, see yourself, and know that you too should be a part of the change. With that, I'm gonna pass it to my co-facilitator, Shireen White from Children's Rights.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I'm Shireen White. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Policy at Children's Rights. And I also want to thank all of you for being here in the room with us. For those of you who are joining us virtually, thank you for taking time for this important conversation. I also want to extend deep gratitude to my colleagues, Hannah Naveed and Stephanie Person, as well as our partners in the international work, Jamil Dakor, Joyce McMillan from JMACforFamilies, and Angela Burton for walking with children's rights as we've done work to ensure that the important and urgent issue of family separation, Black families specifically, and anti-Black racism is an issue that is on the agenda for UN bodies in this international space. So thank you to our partners. So I want to turn to the amazing panelists that have agreed to join us today. If we could just have everybody say your name, your organization, or how you come to this work. And also, when we asked you to be a part of this, we talked about centering the issue of Black families, of family integrity, of belonging, and that's a right that is guaranteed to us by international mechanisms and protocols, and also by our own constitution. And it's a right that's being deprived by this government in so many shapes and forms, policies and practices every single day. So in addition to telling us who you are, tell us why you said yes. What are you sitting with today as it relates to justice for families, justice for Black families? We can start with Tawana.
Hi everyone, my name is Tawana Brown and I am a powerhouse youth advocate who has firsthand experience in the child welfare system. So what's sitting with me today and why I said yes to this conversation is because it's deeply needed. As someone who has experienced what it's like to have your family disrupted and the traumas that were inflicted upon me from the child welfare system, I understand why I need to be in these spaces. You can't have conversations talking about reform or talking about solutions without someone who has lived it, experienced it, and can tell their story more than any report can. So I think that this is a space that I am very happy to be in, and I'm excited to have a great conversation with everybody tonight.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Tatiana Rodriguez, and I come into this space as an impacted parent. I founded Family Matters First in Boston, Massachusetts. I also survived the system, unfortunately, third generation of surviving the system as a youth, but also as a parent being investigated, where I eventually lost my son. That's what brought me to the work and brought me to understand the importance of organizing and organizing parents, because I don't believe that a child is safe without knowing their roots. And when we're talking about child welfare, child safety, we should be talking about parent safety, but not only that, ensuring that families understand their rights. So that's why I said yes. This is very personal to me. It's personal to organize parents and empower parents, though it can be very exhausting after you are fighting so many systems that, such as the prison system and, all these systems that intersect to tell a parent to come and organize. But it gives me hope, because there are parents out here that are stepping up to the call. I appreciate the call to action. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Terrence Derrick. I am a former foster child, and I'm currently the director of JMACforFamilies. So the reason why I'm here today is to basically speak about my personal story with family separation. So I was separated from my mother at the age of 9 years old, and I went back to her at 14. Even though when I went back, the trauma still existed, because my mother, after being separated from her children for so long, she actually developed mental illness. She developed two mental illnesses, which is schizophrenia and paranoia. So even 20 years down the line, this is still something that my mother suffers with. And actively, I'm a director for a learn how to swim company. So I'm trying to change the narrative, one of the reasons why I was able to survive the foster care system was because I had a strong community. And that's something that I don't see in today's world, especially after COVID. So just this year, I was able to offer 100 free swimming lessons to children that's impacted by foster care or at-risk youth. I also teach digital literacy to the community. I'm actually collaborating with Up NYC about this. And I also work another job. I'm an education and employment specialist at a anti-gun violence program. So I actively help kids find employment, find careers, and find things that they want to do before it's too late.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be with you all today. My name is Louis Gasper, and I'm here from Maryland, and I'm just very excited to be with this powerful group of speakers, because I think the reason that I'm here is twofold. And in one, thinking about my own lived experience as somebody who has been impacted, somebody who was disconnected from their culture, and trying to seek that within the system. And then again, as a professional who I'm previously working with the Children's Bureau a few years ago, really trying to hope for the best, but as we were going through things like disproportionality and disparity, just to realize that we didn't have the answers, and we were trying to figure that out with states instead of really acknowledging some of the wrongs and the harms that were perpetuated by our own system on the federal level. And I think similarly, having the experience afterwards of working inside an agency as a senior advisor for prevention, just only to see things like flexible funds and concrete resources not only not be prioritized, but being connected to the same mechanisms that bring families into the system. So, in a lot of ways, My professional experiences reminded me of the broken promises that I experienced while being impacted. And I think because of that, it really drives me to be in spaces like this, like with amazing people right here today, to really talk about the injustices and harms that families face, and that some of the solutions can only best happen from things like lived experience and community engagement and community driving and team work.
Yes, sir.
Hey, family. Is it open? I think it is.
Yeah.
My name is April Lee. I'm co-founder of Philly Voice based in Philadelphia. We aim to end family separation due to poverty, substance misuse, and incarceration. I gotta say, like, why I said yes, right? It's an urgent need to preserve family right now. There's always been an urgent need to preserve family in our country, but especially now, right, where we see families being separated. We have seen in the past families be separated at the borders without anyone acknowledging that, like, our families get separated every day, that we deal with a lot of those pain and those issues every day. And as things come to light, we're still separating families, right? And even at a faster rate right now. Reunification is slowing down in our country. Families don't have access to the things that they need. So I really looked at this opportunity as an urgency to really be able to have this dialogue discussion with you guys, and to ask for people to get activated, to ask for people to stand up and figure out, like, how can we preserve families now and not wait a whole another 10, 15 years to try to figure out something that we've been going through for centuries and decades as a people. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Good evening. I'm David Klein. I'm the Executive Director of the Family Justice Law Center. Before founding Family Justice Law Center a few years ago, I was a public defender representing families in the Bronx when the government, New York City, sought to separate families or forever terminate parents' rights, known as the civil death penalty. I was also a criminal defense attorney in the Bronx. And as bad as things were in criminal court in the Bronx, it was nothing compared to what was happening in family court. And there was a real asymmetry in the type of representation and advocacy from the civil rights litigation side that was happening on behalf of criminal defense defendants, advocates working with community to bring impact litigation to challenge some of the widespread and systemic harm that we were seeing. But there was a dearth of organizations that were standing with parents and with families and looking at the front end and saying, how do we reduce family separation? How do we reduce surveillance? How do we protect family unity? And that led me to launch the Family Justice Law Center. Why am I sitting here today? Well, Shireen asked me, and I don't say no to Shireen. But more fundamentally, 1 in 2, 50%, 1 in 2 Black children born today will be investigated by a child protective agency by the time they turn 18. 50% of all Black children will be investigated. These investigations include scary home searches. They include degrading strip searches. They include interrogations and children being pulled out of schools in front of their friends. This is not just a civil rights issue. It is one of the most important civil rights issues of our time. And I'm thrilled that we're talking about it here tonight.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jamil Dakwar. I'm the director of the ACLU Human Rights Program. You stole my line because I was going to say that.
I saw it down.
But I would add, when Hina and Shireen and Joyce, ask me to be somewhere, I have to show up. But I am really privileged to be here with you, and I think I'm the least knowledgeable about this issue, even though I had the chance to learn and to educate myself about this issue. But I'm here because I'm want to express continued support to the importance of coming together to fight this atrocity that continues to happen in daily life of so many people. Most of them are not known, invisible, they just go as numbers or even, and it's, for me, what I bring to why I'm here is because I bring, you said it's one of the greatest civil rights violations or issues. I think it is a human rights violation. And so many of you here have helped bring it to the international level, to the United Nations, different human rights bodies. I was playing a very modest role in it as a supportive an advisor to all of you. But I think that you really did it. And I'm really happy to be here to also say a little bit more about why we are here, actually, just across from the United Nations, and to connect it to some of the other work that is being done and will be done. And finally, one last thing that I have been able to, as I said, to be more educated about this issue and do something about it. And that's in response to some of the great work that you all have been doing, is that as a member of the New York Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, we actually managed to release a report just a year ago on this very important subject related to the New York State as a whole, and as well as not just the state and then also local governments and the protected agencies and their obligations and their responsibilities under both New York State laws, the U.S. Constitution, and international law. So this report included some of the findings that you helped push for at the international level, and we can talk a little more about it. I have a few copies of the executive summary and the findings of this report by the New York Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, which I'm speaking here not on behalf of the committee, but only as a member of the committee. But I'm really excited to be here, and thank you all for making time tonight.
Thank you all so much. I feel like we can end the program now. But lucky for you, we're just getting started. And so just thank you all for being here. Thank you for those opening words and opening remarks. Jamil said he's not an expert, but he certainly has studied and has been a mentor for all of us who have been for so long thinking about the issue of family separation and family policing as one of civil rights, and then shifting our brains to realize that this is a basic human right of ours, the right to belong and to be with our families. It's a right that all of us hold in this room, and it's one that's not been recognized or realized by the United States government for forever, especially as it relates to Black families. And so I want to have an understanding of why we're here today and ask Jamil to just give some context for the reason that we're convening. And Jamil, your work has really reminded us of the importance of international advocacy, but also what that looks like at home and how that translates into action at home. So if you can share for us the context in which we're convening and why it's important that we're doing so.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you, Shireen. So the reason that we are actually here just across the United Nations headquarters is because there has been some serious troubling developments in this country, as for those who have not heard, where the Trump administration, since January, since taking office, have decided that the country will disengage and will be essentially taking steps to stop cooperating with the United Nations human rights body. It took a decision in January on, actually in an executive order specifically on February 4th, where the White House and the president ordered the government to disengage from the UN Human Rights Council. The council doesn't meet here, it meets in Geneva, but it's the highest human rights body of the United Nations. And as such, it reviews the human rights record of all member states, all 193 member states of the United Nations. The United States is one of them. right? As a member, as a founding member of the United Nations, in 1945. And yet this year, the Trump administration said, no, we will not be participating in this human rights review, which is called the Universal Periodic Review. It is called Universal Periodic Review because it applies and it happens to all UN member states. And it, of course, covers all universal rights that are so important and they're so recognized, starting from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Now, the Trump administration said, not only that we're disengaging, we're not going to cooperate, we're not going to show up for this review. The review happens every 5 years. And as part of this review, the UN Human Rights Council members that participate in the questioning of the US government on its human rights record. What did it do in the last 5 years? Because it happens every 5 years. The first time the US did it was in 2010 during the Obama administration, right? This whole process is fairly new. It's really less than 20 years old. It started, the first review was in 2008, but the US turn came the first time in 2010. It came back again in 2015, again during the Obama administration. And in 2020 was the last time that the US was reviewed in the midst of COVID, in the midst of the pandemic crisis. Most of us could not even go to Geneva for the review. And even though it was still the Trump administration, they still participated, right? And yet this year, they said, we were not going to participate. And the reason for that is that they know that this is a review that will highlight the violations that are happening daily and they are not recognized by a lot of our government agencies or a lot of even sometimes by our court system, because they are framed and they are protected as part of the universal rights system, the universal framework that protects all rights. So here, some of you may say, well, you know, there's the child, there's the family, there's the due process protections, right? There's the right to be free from surveillance, all of these things. And in the way that a lot of us work on these issues, we work on them sometimes very separate. They're not really connected to each other, right? And even the issue of welfare, what does that mean of welfare of the child? Like the name of that system, right? It suggests that it should be something good, positive. And yet when it comes down to breaking it down to the rights of people, you will see that the United States has taken a very, very problematic position on these rights. First of all, we don't even have not ratified the Convention on Rights of the Child, right, to start with. And that has been a shameful thing because the US is the only country in the world that has not ratified the Rights of the Child Convention. And in that convention, the best interest of the child and to protect the child, including the care and the support that needs to be with the family. Adds to that, even when we ratified human rights treaties, like the Civil and Political Rights Treaty, or the Treaty Against Racial Discrimination, we have done very little to make it actionable, to make it enforceable, to make it real here in our communities, in the city of New York, or in the state of New York, or in the nation as a whole. And that is because there was really not a real interest in protecting those fundamental rights, particularly when it comes to the most marginalized community. So this year, instead of preparing for the review for the US review in Geneva, which would be on November 7th, it's actually still on the schedule. And the UN member states are saying, well, we're going to hear from you if you submit information. We did submit information. Many organizations here and around the country submitted, even international organizations submitted information to this process back in April. You can find a summary of all of these, and they were acknowledged. And yet the government would not show up to defend because there's nothing to defend against these violations that are happening, including in the context of family separation, separation of family policing. So what I wanted to say is that we are today here because we are trying to say, even if the US government doesn't show up at the UN to talk about human rights, we are going to do that. We're going to hold it accountable. We're going to make sure that people know about it. There are people watching it. This video hopefully will be shared. You will share the stories, the solutions, what needs to happen in order to make a difference. And we hope that this will also reach those who are, and I know a lot of you work on the space, not only supporting the families and the kids, but also doing something as a matter of policy and law. Our friend Angela couldn't be here, but Angela Burton is one of my heroes because she's been an incredible champion of civil rights, but human rights. She was with us in Geneva with Shireen and Joyce and Hina and others to bring those issues to the United Nations human rights bodies, the Human Rights Committee in 2023. Before that, to the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, to the Working Group of People of African Descent, to the UN Permanent Forum on People of African Descent that met here already a couple of times, right? And this issue is not going away. So what we did, and I want to say that, and I will close with this, based on these conclusions and the findings and recommendations by UN human rights bodies over the last 4 years, right? The work that JMAC for families, children's rights, other organizations that joined in submissions, right? These recommendations are now part of the record, part of the US human rights record. It's part of what the United Nations human rights system said to the US need to be done. And it didn't go completely unheeded. The committee that I sit on, although it doesn't have enforcement power, the New York Advisory Committee to the US Commission on Civil Rights have taken those recommendations and findings and incorporated them into the final report that we released. And we made similar recommendations, or if not exact recommendations that these bodies have made, based on the recommendations that were made by the advocates, the organizers, and directly impacted members. So there's an echo chamber here that is really started with you, with all of you, with the people who have been harmed, the people who have been suffering for a long time. You brought it to the international arena, to the international bodies, to the United Nations, and the United Nations heard you, heard your voices, and recommended things to do about it, and you brought it back. That is not just this particular committee. The White House Domestic Policy Council heard from you. I remember when we went all down to Washington, D.C. During the Biden administration. It was the first time that the White House organizes a meeting with organizations to hear from them about what should be done to implement human rights in the United States. Not just civil rights, human rights too. And here we are, testimonies at the White House meeting with interagency representatives from all across the federal government. And the work continues. So what we're doing here, what you're doing here, is not only showing a great example for how advocates can take issues to the international level, hold the government accountable, and demand change, but keep at it and continue to work at the very local state level while the federal government is abdicating its responsibility, right? So we will not just defend rights, we will have to continue to work proactively to implement those rights. And there are openings. We're having election here in New York City. There are other elections coming up in the state of New York and other states and other cities. Through these changes, through the people who are policymakers, elected officials, we have to hold them accountable and bring the human rights recommendations to them and to push for the changes, whether to change the laws as they stand, abolish some of those laws that are really harmful, and to enact ones that are consistent with international human rights law. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamil. That was amazing. And just a good reminder that we have so many tools sort of in our tool belt, right? And we're all fighting on these different levels, and all of them are important. We often hear people say, why do you go to the UN? What can they do to us? How can they make the US do these things? But having those records of the human rights violations that exist in this country, and having these concluding observations that UN treaty bodies make and recommendations that they make to the US, and being able to find commissions and human rights bodies and legislators here in our country who value those same things, bringing those back to them and saying, the UN said that the US needs to do this. There's a lot of power in that, and we can keep using this lever to fight for families. I want to transition to the panel here. And we thought it was really important to lay a foundation for this idea, this reality of leadership by lived experts. We've read some troubling things over the last few months that have put out there this notion that people with lived experience, hearing from people who have been harmed or impacted by these systems, that's not real research. And we reject every aspect of that. And so we wanted to start with just centering the critical need to continue to be led by, to be guided by people who are impacted by the harms that we've been talking about. Just before this, we had a panel of young people who've been impacted by various systems in this country, whether it's housing and homelessness, whether it was the youth legal system or family policing system. And they all talked about the critical need to be hearing from, led by people who have been harmed by these systems. That's where the solutions lie. And we're really fortunate at Children's Rights to have amazing lived expert partners who guide us on strategy, who guide us as thought partners in this work. And so I just want to pose a question to a few people on our panel to answer. Why is it so important that lived experts are leading these conversations for change and setting the agenda that we have? Tatiana, you want to start?
Sure. I love this question because I bumped into this many times, especially in a state like Massachusetts that claims to be so progressive. They love tokenizing lived experience, and they love saying, "Oh yeah, we have this advocacy group for DCF, and you know they have lived experience, but they're also being paid by DCF, right?" So I feel like it's tainted, but I just wanted to say, like, there's no better data than there's no better data than lived experience. Our stories tell the truth as to what is happening. It's not just a number that, oh, 50% of Black people will come. No, it's real stories that will help you to see the bigger picture and make a connection. It's bigger than a policy change, right? Because I think that the outcomes of like what happens when you interact with the system, the trauma behind it, the mental health that is inflicted, the all of those things that come into play. And I just want to read off of my notes just for time's sake. So I said, when parents lead, we change the conversation from case management to community transformation. Lived experience is data. Our stories carry the evidence that policies alone can't capture. The fear of a knock on a door, the loss of your child without due process. Impacted leadership means designing solutions that actually work. And that actually protect families instead of punishing them. And we're not asking to be included for appearances. We're leading because we've survived the system, and we've survived what the system tries to hide day by day. And until impacted parents are centered in decision making, we'll keep recycling the harms instead of ending it. And we're not political. We don't have any political gain behind this, behind sitting here and taking time out of our busy lives. I'm sitting here with my 9-month-old that I would love to like live free, that I would like. This experience for me is it's different. It's like I'm married now. I have a different level of knowing my rights. I feel empowered. So I don't have that same fear that I had before. And of course, you're never really free, but I would love to be enjoying my child and my new family and just live like nothing ever happened. But unfortunately, I cannot sleep at night thinking about the families that are left behind and the rights that people continue to violate. Like, these systems continue to oppress us and coerce us and make us feel like we need to continue to submit to them, and we have to submit to this Eurocentric way of things, and that's just not the reality. So I think that it's very important that we continue to stand up and continue to push back, that enough is enough. Like, we are the data. Like, our stories is what needs to be at the forefront of things. So thank you for asking.
Thank you so much. Did anyone else wanna jump in there?
I definitely, want to go off of everything that you said. I totally agree. I think when we start having conversations about, trying to, belittle our lived experience, it just goes into what the system has been set up and what the system continues to do. I often say, while you may have your degree in social work, I have a PhD in lived experience. You cannot tell me what I went through, how it impacted me, and the things that have happened because of my personal experience better than I can. So the numbers, like you said, they are true stories, they're real impacts of the things that were inflicted upon us. And the way in which we could start talking about solutions or talking about how the system needs to be reformed, you cannot do that without having those who lived through it firsthand, experienced the traumas, and still living through the traumas at that table. It's more than just having lived experienced experts invited into a space. No, it means sharing authority. It means not having us there just to offer input. No, for us to be able to create the agenda, for us to be in a position where there is a redistribution of power, where it isn't just you just have us to check off a box. No, and it also means aftercare. A lot of times people want to invite, whether it's youth advocates, whether it's parent advocates into these spaces, but afterwards, you're not taking the time to check on me like, hey, I know you just shared something traumatic. What do you need? What resources, what supports do you need? Because it's more than us just showing up in these spaces. We show up because we're passionate. We show up because we've been through things that we want to see stop. We show up because we do understand that there is a need for change, that there's room for change, but we have to keep knocking down those doors. And no matter how much pushback we receive, we still show up and we're still here today. And it's one of those things where we shouldn't have to be in these spaces, but we understand the significance and the importance of having these conversations and for us to shift our narrative. My story matters, and I'm more than just a statistic. I'm more than one of those reports that you like to report out on. I'm somebody who has a name, who has a story, and it deserves to be heard and it deserves to be recognized more than just, oh, she was formerly in the foster care system. But no, let me tell you what the foster care system did to me and how I have been able to whether navigate that space or shifting the narrative that you continuously put on me.
If this panel didn't have to go on, I'd throw this mic way up. Drop that girl.
Yeah, right.
I just wanna say, you know, everything that she said, it was hitting my soul when she speak, but more importantly, not only do they disvalue us in the ways that she just spoke about, but they also try to disvalue us by disenfranchising our ability to earn a living wage. They don't want to pay advocates their worth. Like she said, she has a PhD in lived experience. And so I'm gonna share, right, my personal, that I dropped out of school in the 8th grade. And I promise you, maybe only 2 of you in this room that's smarter than me. That's not intelligence, right? That's not arrogance. It just says that education in and of itself through an institution is not the only way to be educated, and it is not the only way to have intelligence. And so I am very educated and I am quite intelligent, and it has nothing to do with how many years I went to school. So to try to devalue my earning power because you don't feel I went to school long enough, and then when a black or brown person, a former foster youth, a parent who's been impacted does go to college, they still can't get a job being paid what they should be paid, but they now have all of these loans, which is another backdoor mechanism to make us chase a dream that they never want us to obtain.
Right.
Thank you.
I absolutely love this question, because part of why I found and we found that we had to build an entire organization was because of that type of thinking, right? Yeah. I'm not big enough. But seriously, it was because of that type of thinking, right? And being within and working within systems that can easily tokenize you, easily like, you know, trauma dump, clap, I'm so proud of you, and then turn around and make the exact same policy, right? Like, and I always like to think that, you know, for all the smart people in America, you are the reason why we're here. Right?
Yes,
Because
That
we
part.
wasn't at the table when it came down to building the laws that we operate under. We wasn't at the table when it comes down to how our community is going to be affected, whether or not it was intended or unintended. We wasn't at the table to tell you that you're doing wrong, right? And that this won't work. And for some reason, we want to pit one side against the other when it comes down to solutions, but your outcomes have never been good, right? Our children, like these are our children. This is our community. They age out with the highest rate of PTSD. They're more likely to be in poverty, so aged out in poverty, right? Or end up with drug use that become the same adults that y'all trying to disqualify, right? Right? Like you created this. And it kind of grinds my gears a little bit when we get to that, because the people who don't want it or feel like it is not enough, you want to continue to run into the brick wall that you have always been running into. Like we can stop at any point in time as a country, as a people, to just stop causing harm. But you have so many smart people that feel like what we offer, right, is not valuable enough, right? And I got that a lot, and I'm like, check my CV, right? Regardless of whether or not I have that same level of education, right? But I do see and make the connections in my community and see what has not worked, right? Like those, they're my children, not your children. You can't sit in a boardroom and figure out, well, how we're going to help this community. You know, the saviorism that's not really saviorism, that's intended to hurt you, right? And then say, well, they're not responding correctly because we didn't have them at the table. Like it makes no sense. Like you are not asking, and the system don't ask us what we need. They sit behind closed doors and decide what we need, right? And then hold us at the same level. Like I would say this and I will shut up and I will always say this. If the system was to be treated as a parent, it would be thrown under the jet. Like if they were, like if you actually look at the family policing system as a whole and how families are treated, how children are neglected within the system, how children are abused within the system, how resources is not given. If I fell to give my child the proper care and control, so to speak, right, as a parent, you're removing my child or terminating my rights. But as a system, you can fail to give my child proper care and control, and you're like, well, it's not on me, and we don't know how to fix it. Like y'all had y'all shot all of these years, then it's time like to really step back and work with the people who actually know, because our creative, you know, programming and the things that we can come up with that y'all never think about, not pointing at you, because I love you, right? But it's things that you'd be surprised how many spaces I've been in with really high up people, and it's like common sense solutions that they never thought about, right? Because they can't like wrap their brain around something as simple as asking somebody what they need and giving it to them, right? Like that's what sets us apart.
Thank you, April. April started to dig into some of the harms that children experience in the system. Obviously, there are harms that parents experience when they come into contact with the system. There are harms that whole communities experience at the hands of family police systems. And when Jamil started, he laid the foundation for why we're here, right? To talk about the human rights record and violation of the United States. And so I do want to dig into some of those harms that many of us in this room have witnessed, and also that many of us in this room have worked so hard to bring to light for people, and to help them see it. And Terrence, you've been quiet over there, so I'm gonna pick on you to sort of start us off here, and maybe you can share some of the ways in which you have witnessed the United States violate people's human right to family. And we know it starts from family separation and before, and also when young people enter the system, there are human rights violations occurring every day that April started to get into. So pick it up wherever you go.
So, I'm gonna mention a story of one particular young man that I have encountered. So as I mentioned before, I help find, children who is, high risk, find employment. So I got a call from one young man. He was currently in a group home, right? So he shared with me a little bit about his story. One of the things he disclosed with me is that the reason why he's in a group home because his mother couldn't handle the pressure of her baby being taken away from her, and she committed suicide. So then he no longer had a family to go home to. After that, I try to comfort him, and then his phone shut off. I'm assuming the battery died, and then I couldn't get in contact with him ever since. From then, I was asking around, where is this kid located? Where is he? He was located in a group home in Marble Hill. When I arrived at the group home in Marble Hill, I was looking for him. They said that he's gonna come right back, right? I stayed there for probably 3 hours. And then I started asking questions about, who is this kid? What's his personality like? And they said nasty things about him. And this is the people within the group home, the workers in the group home. The social workers wasn't actually there. And it came to find out that somebody who worked the night shift, when they finally came in, they told me that he ran away. So he was supposed to be there. I was supposed to help him find employment, and he ran away. And when, because I am familiar with the shelter system just because of the nature of the job, I went to the men's shelter where you first sign in, which is the first step in the shelter system, and I checked the attendance log or the sign-in sheet, and he never made it. So this is the atrocities that I have personally witnessed, and I'm sorry, I'm lost for words a little bit. And, I just try to prevent this on an everyday basis.
Yeah, no worries, take your time. I mean, in state custody, we have missing children,
Yes.
right? That's what you're telling us. That's the story that you're sharing. Who else wants to talk about harms that they witnessed? Tatiana, you wanna jump in here? Sure.
So for families like mine, the harm started at the very beginning, where surveillance started, right? It also makes me to think back, like my mother had said something about, her mother, realizing that her mother, was involved with DCF, due to, ignorance about like mental health, and my mom was like running away, et cetera, and things like that. Just to know that so many immigrants come here and they're not told, right, that they have this right, right? And it makes me think about even just the community. The community in itself doesn't know. Like they know, like we know the Constitution, oh, you can't enter my home without a warrant, but many people don't understand that that applies to the family police. Because the family police are not called family police, they're called social workers, when they're really not social workers. So it makes me think about that, how social workers show up without warrants. Neighbors are like deputized to report, right? Coercion is taking place. And poverty is treated like abuse. I've seen moms lose children because they lack housing, childcare, not because of danger, And these are societal issues, right? This is the issue that we have as a society, and we're being punished for this. I've seen mothers lose children because they lack childcare. When your child is taken, you're stripped of your identity as a parent and forced into compliance under a threat, coercion, again, right? Um, and it's a psychological warfare of grief, okay? When I tell you that I was suicidal, I thank God I am still here and I'm here. And it's because of my faith in God, because I knew that if I did not fight, that my son can end up in the system. My son can end up in prison, because if we look at the prison system, if you ask prisoner, I don't want to call them prisoners. When you ask incarcerated individuals, like, what was your life like? 80% of them will tell you that they were in cages as youth, in these group homes that Terrence is talking about. And I've witnessed those things working in group homes, because initially when I aged out of foster care homeless, like, these were things I wanted to go back and reach back. And I thought that I could help children within the system, when I found out that I couldn't. We had, staff just like that, like talking about children, their mental health, talking about their parents, just dehumanizing them in front of the children, talking about children's parents in front of them. So let's talk about violating children's rights, violating their right to even have contact with family. I remember being in a group home and being on like this punishment for like the first week. And I'm like, what am I being punished for? Like, I'm in this custody because my mom supposedly did something wrong. Why do I have to wait and earn points in order to call home? Like, what type of punishment is this? You know what I'm saying? Like, I should be being supported. I should be, my family, it should be a welcoming space for my family to come and help me cope. But instead, I have to earn these things. I have to earn going outside in the community, just taking a walk, going to the ice cream shop, because it's all surveillance. From the moment that I entered the system, I was put in the back of a police cruiser. Let's talk about a human right violation right there. Like, I am a child. I was 13 years old and I was put in the back of a cruiser to go to court. Like, and the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because, like, people need to understand this is beyond like a human rights violation. This is an ethical. If you go to any country, I feel like we are the worst. So the fact that the United States has opted out, and shame on Donald Trump's administration, shame on them, because it's like you preach God, but this is not godly work. This is the devil's work. And they call it the civil penalty, but it's the family death penalty. We're talking about the ultimate crime. It leads to you being separated from your lifeline, from your cultural identity. You're being separated. Like, that is the ultimate violation. So I'll yield there, but I just think that we need to really push this on a deeper level and have conversations about, like, what people's rights are. Because a right, just because you know a right, if you don't apply it, it's not a right. And if you're not fully educated, and hence why I have a partnership with Harvard Legal Aid Bureau, Greater Boston Legal Services in Boston, Harvard Law Justice Clinic, and I also have a partnership with Children's Rights and Family Law Center here, where we're teaching folks their rights, right? And we're actually being very intentional about how we teach folks their rights, because just because I remember teaching, doing Know Your Rights trainings for the past 3 years, and I have parents that they freeze up. They get afraid when it's time to apply it. So we came back to the drawing board and trying to figure out creative ways to get parents, like, to do role plays and things like that. Like, what if this happens and that happens? Like, it's okay, you can, because they use a psychological thing, especially when you're in this vulnerable position. And you're already going through so many things with with other things in your life, trying to have financial stability, trying to have housing stability, or trying to find housing, or trying to flee a domestic violence situation, and they expect you to just run right there at the moment, not realizing that there's so many other moving parts to it. So yeah, that's what I totally feel that it's been from the time that they even are surveilling you in school, it's a violation. Like how can I not like have the right to have an education? Like the moment that DCF workers go to school and question a child when their mom is not there. Like, that's like when the police question children and it's called corruption, and then the case could be thrown away because they got an alibi from a child without the parent present. But this is happening in family policing. Why?
That piece of knowing your rights is a huge piece. Something that I think across states we work on a lot, but it's hard when you feel like your child is being held hostage, right? I've been just thinking a lot just about like, what you're saying and why we're here. I was like recently, what happened in Chicago and an entire building, apartment building, the families get zip tied, separated, right? Like, and it's heartbreaking to watch, but it's also on the other side of that, like case managers that act like ICE, right? And people don't make the connection to how much fear there is in the community. They don't make the connection to those invisible zip ties that we have when you're walking through the child welfare system in America. Like the same way that ICE can pop up at your door, right? Ghost you, right? I wholeheartedly, lose my children. You feel like they're kidnapped, right? Without the due process necessary, right? It took for me to actually work for a law firm to know I had rights to make a phone call to my children, right? So when you're up against something so powerful and the case manager come to your house, which we see a whole lot, right? They can sit there and lie to you, right? Lie on you, and not tell you that, hey, you have the right to not open this door at the moment, or, we don't have family Miranda across all the states, right? You don't, what you see in that fear, and that pure fear that I still get sometimes with the knock on the door, even though it's years later, right? The trauma that's still in your family, just from an investigation, like any child that gets removed, there's trauma attached to that. And it's not just to the child and to the parents, but the entire community feels the loss of our children when termination happens, right? When you lose your rights to your family, to your culture, and things like that. You see children being taken, we're talking about like what I witnessed, right? Children being taken due to having rodents in a house, right? Instead of spending enough money to actually just bomb the house or get rid of the rodent, right? Children being taken to not because they have a structurally damaged home, when Black women like have a higher rate of evictions and it's hard to get good houses. Eviction is on your name for life, right? So now I can't move out of the area that you want me to move out of. I have to depend on what we call kind of slumlords, dilapidated living, because I don't have the means to move, and you won't allow me to move because this record, but you're holding me accountable for the very thing that I want to provide, but you give me no access to do so, right? And you see this like time and time again. But when I say that like the biggest human rights is that fear that they instill in the community and into parents' spirits to not fight me, right? You're scared when you have someone holding your child hostage. You're going against an entire system that's kind of set in their ways. you might not, most times, you don't have that due process before an investigation. Well, most times, you don't have that. And even in situations where due process should apply, you have an attorney, that attorney might not have the means and know-how to even walk you through the case. You see, families being connected to resources that's not resource, right? Or, you can be told that, hey, in order for you to get your child, I want you to get a house and maintain housing. I want you to get a job and maintain housing and maintain housing. Then I want you to go to this parenting class. Then I want you to go to trauma class. Then I want you to do a financial class that don't give you a job. And then I'm going to tell you to do a housing class that's not going to give you a house. And make sure you do all of these things in order to prove that you love the child that you birthed, right? And if you don't do those things, it's really a setup for failure. And it gets frustrating because we do see these, this outrage, right? Rightfully so. To see an entire building be zip tied, right? And families crying and children being separated. I see that every day at the courthouse in Philadelphia, right? But you don't see the public outrage or the outcry to the injustices that has been going on in our community and continue to do so because of that pure fear that was instilled. Of course, I'm going to try to comply if you're holding my child hostage.
The harms are endless. Thank you for laying those out, April, Tatiana. And, Tatiana also started to get at something else and talking about her mom and her mom's experience in the system, which is that the harms happen and it doesn't just stop there, right? Like it keeps going generation after generation after generation. And it's not just this one moment in time. And so we have to remember that when we think about these practices and how they show up today, but then also what they're going to look like years and years down the road in the lives of our children and their children. So thanks for laying that out. We with JMACforFamilies and Angela Burton, we've written a number of reports to different UN treaty bodies that sort of set out these kinds of human rights violations, and also talk about a lot of what April was talking about were families who were lacking resources and in need, right? And so we recently submitted a report to the UN Special Rapporteur who was doing one on poverty and coercion by systems that were supposed to be there to support, and instead they're there to oppress people. And so we'll share links for a lot of these reports that will lay out in more detail some of the things that Tatiana and April were setting up. Another thing that I want to talk about for folks who may not understand the U.S. family policing system and what it looks like and how it's structured, we lay that out in reports too, including why we call it the family policing system. But I want to be really clear that people say, well, the family policing system doesn't help with that, right? Like they remove your children, they're not finding you a house, they're not paying your electric bill most of the time, they're not helping with these things. It wasn't designed for that, right? Like CPS is not designed to help families in this way. It was designed and structured to target poor families, families of color, immigrant families, Indigenous families. It was set up to do that. And when you were in need, or when they decided that those parents weren't good enough, to remove your children, to take your children from you. That's the structure that this system exists within. The financials show that, right? You get money as a state agency when families' rights are terminated and then they're adopted out. You don't get money as a state agency when a child is reunified with their family, or for keeping a family together and never removing that child to begin with, right? So the system was structured in this way to punish people for lacking and for other problems that have existed within our society that are deeply rooted in the really tragic history that we have here in the US. And I want to talk a little bit about real support, right? Because we're saying that the family policing system isn't support, it's not helping. We've demonstrated the harms that happen when children enter the system and before. So I want to hear from people on real support, right? Like what families need. And Joyce, you wanna start us off there?
I'm gonna start you guys off on what real support looks like, because just making a change for families, JMACforFamilies, the organization I founded and that I'm the executive director of, does real support for families. An example of that is a parent who was locked out of New York City shelter system when she gave birth. And her apartment, she had been in the shelter system for a year. And the apartment that she was scheduled to move in had been inspected and approved. And when they locked her out, they said, we know the apartment was inspected and approved, but because you got locked out, we can't reinstate you, and therefore you're gonna have to go back to the shelter system. These are your tax dollars, by the way, right? So spend another year in the shelter system with a newborn baby that's only a week old, right? So that we can surveil you, because they are a tentacle of the foster system in surveilling families and looking to separate families. And so they really left this parent absolutely no choice but to go back to the shelter system. So my organization paid over $5,000 to move this parent into her apartment. Another story, a parent was experiencing DV. We changed the lock. Another parent from the Bronx, she has 3 children on the spectrum. It's very difficult for her to handle the 3 children on the spectrum on the train in the morning. She drives them to school because in the Bronx, a lot of times you don't get bus service. They find reasons why you don't. So she's responsible to take those 3 children to school. Her car got towed. We got her car out of tow, right? So the tangible things, you give out Pampers, baby milk, gently used car seats, and other tangible material needs. Can I do it all? No, JMACforFamilies cannot do it all. But it's gonna be a collective of us, because let me tell you what's happening. What's happening is they're utilizing your tax dollars to abuse families and to create a tale of 2 cities, something that Bill de Blasio talked about when he was mayor here in New York City. And what's happening is they're putting people at risk, because right now it's rumored that people will not be getting SNAP benefits for the month of November. So there was a time when you had to be afraid to go outside if people were wearing gold, or women I saw turn their wedding bands around on the train so that the diamond did not glare and catch someone's attention. We didn't buy sheepskin coats at a point because people were being murdered for sheepskins. Like, all of these things existed, but now people are gonna be killed over bare fucking necessities. Food. Are you gonna feel safe coming out of a supermarket with 2 full bags of food when you know everyone in that neighborhood has not eaten? And that's the entrapment of Black people. I cannot say that is my story, but it is a story that I see, that hardworking Black people who do make a decent salary still live in a neighborhood that is crime ridden. Not because the people in the neighborhood is bad, but because every resource has been stolen and taken and hidden, and obstacles placed in front of it to prevent people from having. And then when people act out because they want to have basic needs, we demonize and criminalize and judge those people. But the fact of the matter is, Black people who work hard still live in those neighborhoods where poverty exists, and they are at high risk of being a person with 2 shopping bags just trying to feed their family, lucky and blessed to have the ability to do so, but their life is at risk. And everyone who does not put pressure on this government to utilize their tax dollars in a different way is participating in the harm.
Yeah.
You cannot sit back, be quiet, watch it, judge people, talk about them, and not do anything to change anything.
That's right.
I just don't believe in that. I believe in action.
Thank you, Joyce. That's real. That's an acknowledgement to and a testimony about this current moment, and what we're experiencing, all the changes, that are happening on the federal level. And so when we get to the end of this, we'll talk about, how what's happening on a federal level might continue, but how we can, confront that in our local communities and on a local and state level. There is still plenty of room for good work to be done, and happening. I want to give Louis, an opportunity to weigh in too on this question of what does real support look like?
Thank you so much. And I'll just have to say, I work for Joyce and, if you can't beat them, join them. So I'll stay with you. Really, grateful to be talking about the importance of this. And there was two really great questions beforehand, so I'll try to weave some of my thoughts into this as well. But I think real support versus surveillance, back to our first question about lived experience, it starts with being able to center lived experts in guiding decisions as it relates to the structures of it. But I wanted to also point out too, that there is a big difference, even when we talk about, lived expert engagement as far as, is it something within the family policing system versus outside? Because so many of us, I know myself, was initially invited into this work, really working alongside the agency, only to find that, in certain ways, it was perpetuating surveillance more than, working towards what I believed in, perpetuating things like foster home recruitment versus what I believed in, which is ultimately, the togetherness of families. So I think, in addition to, real support from lived experts, just to guide along the way, also hearing about their needs, and really from community-based organizations, who are really doing the work, who are not necessarily connected with the agency, but focus number one, first and foremost, on connecting with the people. So you can understand, what are those support services that are needed, and that oftentimes that they need to be tailored and unconditional. And that doesn't mean in a way that, scares people, but rather understanding that, there can be multifaceted levels of support. Like I have my electric bill that I need to pay today as a parent. So I have my life heap support, but also how am I going to keep that up for the next 3 to 6 months? Knowing that it's not only, the reliance specifically on the family policing system in order to get these, but on all of these quote unquote sister agencies, where you're supposed to be able to go and ask and request for these resources, only to figure out that there's wait lists or it's not possible or that you don't qualify. And especially for those families, right above the poverty level, that still ultimately face those same exact problems. So I think when we think about real support, and I think a lot about, all of the ways that I try to help fix this within the agency. A lot of people talk about the development of warm lines, or how can we just have this innovative right answer that exists within the agency. But I'll say behind closed doors, a lot of the conversations is that in order to have the accountability that we need, this should live outside of our system. When you get to the point of city council budget hearings and things, language changes. But even on the inside, that they're not equipped to do it. And when you look at the practices of it, on average, people who are looking towards the actual agency to, in this case, in DC's agency, for answers of how to be supported was less than 10% who actually got what they needed when you went through the line. But so many more families who came up to the radar because they were trying to seek these services, despite that being the selling point of being able to engage with it. And there's a lot of implicit ways that surveillance still happens, even with this language, because there are minimal changes to our actual processes. When we look at things like equity and mandated reporting, ultimately, have worked with multiple agencies who have said, we are going to change the way that we have our mandated reporter trainings in hundreds and hundreds of hours to include, equity into it, just to change a module or nothing. And when you talk with people, when you talk with the mandated reporters, they still, many of whom are connected to things like family treatments or family support centers or success centers, they still say that it's the same. So, when we think about what real support looks like for families, I think that we need to really listen to the families and, listen to the communities. And, that might take unlearning too. Might take, some of these things that we call our evidence-based practices or things that are supposed to help, are rooted in white supremacy. When they're rooted, the evaluation, to get to that level of criteria to be able to pass, there's a lot of things that communities know that work, that the organizations that are on the ground, like Joyce, like many others, that aren't necessarily in these answers. And I think it also, takes us, people need to look at like the funding mechanisms as well. Understand the areas that are bloated ultimately within the agency when you know that the number of unsubstantiated calls is bloated too, despite and investigations is bloated as well. There's a lot of parallels that we can make when we think of how do we get the money for real support. But real support is not just like a one-time, it's not you on the administrative end defining what that support looks like. It really is that collaboration and bringing them in order to really understand both short and long term, and understanding the components of healing that are important, the components along the way, so we can be, we can have families that truly have the healing necessary to be at this level of sufficiency, and supporting. So, I think real support, we need to like look back and for, the power that exists within the agencies, give it back to the communities, who really have been doing this work, and the organizations who know, and I've seen like very unique things. I know at like Martha's Table, for example, I would go, in DC, and they had programs like, for the first year, like we'll offer as a parent, like we'll offer you like a $1,000 stipend, but then there was also things, different pilots and stuff too. And I think that those are helpful, but it's only helpful if it can be done in a way that's not connected to the family surveillance system. Because I was that person representing the agency, and I can't tell you how many people came up to me and told me, well, you might be promoting this worm line, but the agency just took 2 of my kids. So it really makes it so, what we're intended to do, if you're really going to the communities that are most impacted, they also understand what that intergenerational trauma looks like. They're not going to want to touch that. That's why we need to find solutions outside, whether it is partnerships with trust-based philanthropy and, informing them, and defining, what it looks like to have them feed into concrete supports, or, advocacy within the government to not have the middleman of the agency defining, because so many programs too, they have these flexible funds, they have it, but so much of the overhead goes towards the agency, that it doesn't get to the families. And we could do so much if that changed, I believe.
Thank you. Thank you, Louis. Louis was touching on some examples of communities and building power in communities too. And that's an important part of this conversation and in this particular moment. So I want to talk about that. I would love for people to share examples of what you're seeing in communities right now and in the ways in which communities are building power and using tools like advocacy or organizing or litigation in the courts in order to build power in communities. If you can give some examples, and our friend David has been very quiet. So David, we're going to start with you if that's okay.
A variety of people, when they talk about thinking about what are the strategies for building real support from the agencies, have a nifty turn of phrase, which is, I'm not going to butcher it, but if the help doesn't help, it's not help.
That sounds like JMACforFamilies.
Maybe. And that's true for the agencies that we're seeking to reform. But we also have to make sure to center that for those of us who are trying to support the community in enacting that change. There's some amazing organizing and mobilizing and narrative change work that's happening across the country. And there's a real danger for that to become a vehicle for certain agendas and for help that may look like help, but doesn't really help. And as we're thinking about what strategies to use jurisdictionally, geographically, collectively to attack and reform, we have to think about where are we headed and why are we trying to do that. It's very easy for, particularly as a lawyer, to listen to people's lived experiences and identify illegality. You've heard it in the last hour. It's not hard to listen to Tatiana talking about government agents coming into homes without court orders and identifying that that's a Fourth Amendment violation. It's not hard listening to April talk about children being torn apart from parents without any judicial oversight and not having the opportunity to be heard properly after, and identifying that that's a due process violation. It's not hard to listen to so many other stories about how children are being treated in congregate care facilities and how children who are struggling with disabilities and parents who are advocating against them and agencies retaliating against them and not giving them what they need are ADA, American with Disabilities Act violations. Identifying as lawyers the illegality is the easy part if we listen. But the hard part is understanding how do we use the tools that we have as advocates to end up at a place where that stops happening. And we've heard very much about that there's a movement to minimize and to reject the experiences of those who have gone through the system. And if we fall into that trap because they're in isolation or because they don't have degrees or whatever, ostensibly people are putting forth to say that they know what is best, we lose what the real solutions are. And the only real way that advocacy, that help is going to help, is if we understand and change what people have identified. But we're in a dangerous moment right now for this field. Because as much progress as we've made because of so many who have lived it, it creates and primes an opportunity for exploitation of it. So as we think about strategies for building power, we must center what is fundamentally wrong. And as a lawyer, what that means for us is not just listening, but then working with, learning from, and designing legal strategies to change that. And that hard part can't be done without true partnership. Because the purely legal part, as I said, the easy part.
Thank you, David. We waited all that time because we know it would be really good. Anybody else want to touch that? Strategies for building power in communities and what you've seen in communities, levers you're using in communities. You want to hit that too?
Yes. So One of the things that I've witnessed, and it's shocking to me, is the lack of information. I think a lot of things can be prevented with information. And it's just about how information is circulated, right? One of the things I'm personally working on, as I said earlier, was I'm teaching a digital literacy class for free in the South Bronx. And it's going to be about 40 participants within it, whether it's youth, parents, adults, right? And one of the things I want to highlight, especially when it comes to kids, especially when it comes to families dealing with the foster care system, is the lack of information, how to find that information. I think it's grossly underrated how powerful the information could switch the tide of whether a kid is getting taken away or whether a kid is stays at home. So one of the things I am actively going to work on is teaching people how to research, how to find the information that they actually want to, because there's a lot of fluff on the internet and it could be confusing. And I want to give parents the confidence to defend themselves with self-studying of the things that they research. Yeah, so that's.
Thank you. Information is power. And I, Tatiana mentioned like the Know Your Rights work and how important it is to share and make sure people have that information at their fingertips. So thanks for sharing that. April, you want to say something?
Yeah, David, you know I love you, and the partnerships is such a big piece, especially with, like between organizations, removing some of those silos, right? And for us, at Philly Voice, it's really about organizing our community in a way to build multiple advocates, right? To actually activate our community, teach our community, like with the understanding that it's going to kind of take us to help us, right? It's that false narrative of what actually happens in a family policing system has been out there forever, right? It's perpetuated by media, and parents are demonized, our community. I remember like me going through a lot of the process and people treating me as if I'm a unicorn, right? Like, or literally hearing the words, "You're articulate," right? As a parent. And I'm like, what is he talking about? There's thousands of me, right? I have plenty of me in my community. What is he talking about, right? I'm not unique, right? Nor is the struggles that families face within the system. It's not unique state to state. Like the same thing that's going on in Philadelphia is the same thing that's going on in New York, same thing that's going on in Texas, right? It's nothing new. But what is new is having the ability to start shifting that false narrative of, that saviorism system that's deemed to help, right? And I think one of the things that we do and like highly look at outside of partnering with, movement lawyers and people that's going to actually uplift the community, put some skin in the game and walk in solidarity with the community and allow the community to lead what's needed and what needs to be changed. But in order for the community to lead, we believe we must organize, we must educate, and we must partner with some other orgs, right? Because you guys have power. Some of these organizations have power that we just don't have as the community, but it's really a time where, like, due to like movement lawyering and people like kind of putting skin in the game, so to speak, right? This is really the time where we can like create our wildest dreams, right? I'm like, although even within this panel, yes, it's like it's freaking horrible the things that's going on, but this is also a time where we can breathe, imagine and envision what our community would look like without this, right? And how do we build that? And I think that's something that we're doing at Philly Voice well, is let us figure out what's needed. You lend your privilege and power, allow it to be created, and then that way we can save ourselves by ourselves, so to speak, because we've never been saved in this country, right? So it's really gonna take us.
Thank you, April. Yeah, yeah. There's time.
So as we're sitting here talking about, building power and accountability, I can't help but to think about the amazing, work that, we're doing in Massachusetts, changing the trajectory of like what it is to really show up for families, educate, empower them, because first of all, they're coming very broken. So empowering them, and after we, help them get to that place, after so long of advocating for them, showing up to the foster care review meeting, showing up for court support. I don't know if you know the participatory defense module, but we are trying to implement, well, not trying, we have been implementing it, and look forward to doing a deeper dive into training around that, with a long time collaboration partnership with, Harvard Legal Aid Bureau. They have really stepped it up a notch when we're talking about like family defense in Massachusetts, because unlike, the Bronx Defenders and like, family defense places here in New York, Massachusetts, the difference there is we have, parents, we have lawyers that are defending parents and children. So it's not separate entities. So we have a lot of biases when lawyers are showing up. And one of the things that we do at Family Matters First, and we are providing the early defense advocacy, which I come in, but then we have the early defense attorneys that come in during the investigation stage. And that is, something that I'm not really seeing Massachusetts other early defense places really like humanize the parents, which is very bad because it's making parents just feel like they have to submit, and not exert their rights. For example, parents don't have to let social workers come and do a monthly visit in their home. They can do that monthly visit in the community. They can go to, the office and do it there. Because that is the way that social workers will, build up a case, like the police, right? They're build an investigation. They want to build up a case against you, and it all ties into, money, right? Money that the feds are giving the states, and the states are funding these, foster care agencies, which I go back to like what, I kind of wanted to say earlier, but that same money should be going to families. You're taking children away for those same reasons. And that money should be going to these families instead of the agencies. So I feel like until we don't start like treating these, family defense places or, public defenders as bureaucracies, and really like finding creative ways to defend families and removing our personal biases, we can't create, power. And, so that's something that we're doing in Massachusetts. And I just really wanted to uplift that because it's really beautiful to watch attorneys really like, step up to another level and like really try to help and partner with, my organization, being that, we have a lot of parents that have been coming for a very long time, fighting for their cases for a very long time. They feel like they have something tangible, that they're being heard. So it makes them want to come back, and it makes them want to show up to, Family Miranda, hearing, that we just had in Massachusetts. We presented the same bill that, you all did here in New York, JMACforFamilies. And it really was a beautiful turnout, but that was a result of the advocacy and the, the partnerships that I have with Harvard Legal Aid Bureau, Greater Boston Legal Services. Parents need to feel like they're getting something, right? Like, they're not just gonna show up, somewhere because they're busy fighting all these systems, like I said earlier. So I think that that's beautiful, it's been beautifully done, and I just wanted to give a major shout out to all of like my partners, you guys, stepping up and coming and doing the constitutional rights trainings. Like, that right there is building power, because you're empowering families and you're making families feel heard, and the power dynamics as well. Like, you're coming down and you're not like, oh, I'm a lawyer, I can't sit with you, No, I want to hear you. I want to sit down with you, and I want to strategize based on your expertise, because this is your story. You're the expert in your life.
And if I could just add, because there's so much power in that, like, I think we all know the goal isn't just to know your rights, it's to know how to be able to exercise your rights. Because at the end of the day, like, that's really all that matters, and knowing that there's retaliation that might come from it, but knowing also the strategies in order to be able to combat that. And similarly, like, whether it's on the foster youth side, where it's like we have our youth bill of rights, we know that those are getting violated, and maybe there's an ombudsman, somebody to report to, sometimes within the agency, sometimes outside. That's a big difference. But understanding the other mechanisms of being able to report, of being able to plan around and document the same way that the agency documents you when you're doing something.
Yeah.
In order to be able to really, exercise and fight for it. And similarly, if you're a parent, understanding the things that are your rights, even if there aren't the family Miranda rights that tell you that they still exist, that you do things like have a copy of your written summary when you're under investigation, that you are able to record, and if not, you're recording that moment too, all these things that, at the end of the day, it's about, fighting coercion in a lot of ways, and it's not going to be, knowing your rights isn't necessarily going to help you exercise them if you're not ready for that moment, because it is against agency coercion, and it's meant to be scary, so.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Tatiana. We're talking about building power in communities, and it's resonating with folks. So Tatiana, I do know your name, Tawana. I had the privilege of working with Tawana for a full year.
I'm gonna chime in on here, and I'm gonna kind of shift the perspective a little bit, because like I said earlier, I am a youth advocate. So part of that, while I was going through the child welfare system, I had to learn how to navigate that child welfare space. So I do a lot of work in empowering young people who are still currently living out their experience with the child welfare system, of not being afraid to push back and knock down doors, even while still being in foster care. You talked about the lack of information. That's something that I was sitting here and I was thinking about, the work that I've been able to do, just reminding young people about their rights, right? What does your youth bill of rights look like? How can you hold your social worker accountable because they denied you your independent living stipend this month because you didn't attend whatever training they said you had to attend? What does that look like by holding these agencies and these staff workers accountable? Also letting them know that they have access to things such as changing their health insurance that is provided by the state, by having access to report their social workers, by actually going to court and actually speaking up for themselves. Because that was something that I learned very quickly while being in the foster care system, is that there's so many people that are so quick to tell you no. And I was always a person like, okay, you're telling me that I don't have rights or access to this. However, if I go to your supervisor and I ask the same question, is the answer going to be the same? And that's when I started having a lot of people that was afraid when I enter certain spaces, because now you're seeing this 15-year-old girl. No, I'm not rude. No, I'm not assertive. What I am is confident that I know that you have some answers for me, even if you're not saying them blatantly. So if you're gonna give me a no, I'm gonna find somebody else who's gonna give me a yes. And I feel like it's very important to talk about that as well, because we can have a lot of conversations about what the system is doing and how they're affecting young people. But we also need to acknowledge that there's young people still living out their experience to this day. They have to be able to navigate that space and navigate it from a place of being empowered. In the state of New Jersey, while I served on a youth advisory board for the Department of Children and Families, we were able to hold the commissioner in New Jersey State Agency accountable for knowing, like, I cannot be denied the right to have access to see my siblings just because we're in different foster placements. And I can say as of January 12, 2023, the Sibling Bill of Rights was signed into New Jersey State Legislature by Governor Tony. And I think from young people being able to sit in a room and say, listen, these are our experiences. These are the ways in which we were traumatized and we were impacted, but what can we do with that? So it doesn't always have to look like advocating from outside of the spaces. You were talking about, when you were in a space, working with the Children's Bureau and stuff like that. I think we also need to empower young advocates, especially, and even in my work, how I've transitioned from being a direct advocate for the state and being able to navigate both the space with inside and outside of it. What does that look like? And what does that look like being able to share my truths, to acknowledge the supports that the system does have, the traumas that the system did inflict on me, and what does that look like? And how can I empower my young folks that I encounter every day? When I go to schools and talk to young people, they're like, oh my God, I didn't even know I had access to New Jersey scholarship funds. Like, there's so much money within the state too, but they're not telling you that. And I think that plays into the part of just like continuing the cycle, right? They don't want us to break free of all the things that they're inflicting upon us. And that just comes from a place of knowing, a place of not being afraid to take up space, and also to demand like answers to different things, because a lot of the times we have everybody else trying to figure out solutions for us, but they don't know how the things that they're putting in place is affecting us. I could go to court and you could tell me my permanency plan, but how are you going to figure that out? You didn't ask me what my permanency plan looks like for me, right? How are you going to decide that adoption is the best option for me when I want to be reunified with my family, for example? How are you going to decide that staying in a congregate care facility is better than me actually meeting with a therapist one-on-one and then trying to find some other type of placement? And these are things that I found like very challenging. But once I found my voice in those spaces, and once I realized that there was so much power in me having conviction and not like stepping back, I realized that a lot of people realize like, oh, this is not one that you're just gonna say no to, because she's gonna email your boss's boss's boss. And so you figure out how to like do that. So I definitely wanted to uplift that when we talk about like how people are organizing and what policies and stuff like that look like, because it is being done.
Thank you, Tawana. I think everything that people identified as examples and ways to build power and community, those are all ways that we take the acknowledgement of UN treaty bodies and other UN member states, and their acknowledgement that the US human rights record is poor and needs correcting. We take that acknowledgement and bring it back home by implementing these kinds of community power building strategies that will impact people's lives, that are impacting people's lives right now. We're gonna take 1 minute each, have a watch, 1 minute or less. And I think it's important to hear from people what's giving you hope in this moment. Because we talked a lot about everything that's coming at us. 2025 has been 10 years rolled up into not even a full year yet. And so why don't you share, if you don't mind, what's giving you hope as we look forward to the future, as we figure out whether the US will or will not show up for its UPR review in Geneva on November 7th. We can just go around this way if that's okay. We'll start with you, Katya.
So what's giving me hope is sitting here with you all and watching Tawana, which I'm looking at you and I'm looking at my younger self, and I'm so proud of you. Like, that's giving me hope, because like our youth are refusing to give in. And if Tawana is this one, this one youth that is just pushing back and she's just not stopping, like imagine how many youth you're impacting, so that's giving me hope. I'll say parents who refuse to give up is giving me hope. Watching my parents that show up tirelessly, as much as DCF, tries to strip them of everything and leave them with scraps. And just the ones who like turn in their stories into movements, like us here, sis in the audience, like, that is what's giving me hope when I go on Facebook and I just see like everybody doing their thing. Amanda in North Carolina, those are the things that are giving me hope. You know, families that are writing legislation. What I just heard, what you did, like that's major, you know? And I would say, every time a parent learns their rights and applies it, that gives me hope. Because there's power in that. And just knowing that, you know, I was invited here to speak and that we are here, that you all allocated funds to do this to empower, our families and voices and communities and to really, really let the UN understand that just because the US didn't show up, it doesn't mean that impacted individuals are not gonna show up and we will not stop showing up.
It's impossible to, sit at this table and other tables and not hear the topic of rights come up time and time again. And rights are not some amorphous thing. They are protections that we have, against forces and powers, that are frequently wrong, are frequently cloaked in, a sense of, benevolence, and of doing good. And that's when we need to be most on guard. History has taught us that time and time again, that we most need to be, most alert and most suspicious that when what we're fighting against, asserts to be helpful. We've heard that we need to know our rights. Louis, you said it's important that families need to know how to exercise their rights. It's also important that families be able to vindicate their rights after they've been exercised. And at the Family Justice Law Center, we sue. We bring lawsuits. We seek to vindicate rights. But what gives me hope is that you can only vindicate rights if there are people willing to tell their stories. And in this field in particular, it's one that frequently comes with a lot of shame. Because if you've been investigated by Child Protective Services, it must mean that you're a bad parent. It must mean that you don't love your child. What is worse? What could be worse than that? But because of the movement that has been created, because of the narrative change that has been achieved, because of the bravery that we're seeing, families are stepping forward and saying no more. I want to give a special shout out to Shalonda Curtis Hackett, who's here. And I say that because Shalonda is a named plaintiff in a major class action lawsuit. And Shalonda is willing not just to put her name forward, but to tell her story. She goes on TV, she goes on radio, she goes on press. As I said time and again for the call to action, us lawyers can play an important role, but it's a very small role. And what gives me hope from our perspective as an organization are those willing to trust us and trust that we hopefully are there to do what you've taught us.
I think that, you know, so many things, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, how many people are at this table? So many reasons, to feel hope. But I think one thing particularly for me is just seeing, you know, organizations that are embracing, you know, lived experience. And I'll give one example. I work with Joyce, with the American Bar Association. And I've been pressuring them for like the past year and a half. It just can't be just us two. You know, there's so many people out there who haven't. And it wasn't an easy process. Like I will say it was hard, but basically the funder said there's no money, and like, well, what about our subcontracts? You know, we have a lot of money that goes to a lot of experts, but the experts that we need are lived experts. And now, you know, we're able to finally create, you know, more positions. And I think it's so important for organizations to, even if it takes feeling the friction of like, how far can you go as far as engaging lived experts in this work? Because you may not have the answers and it may be hard, but they'll always get you further along to really get to the root of it. And it just even being in this table, it reminds me that, you know, even if the US doesn't show up for the Universal Periodic Review, lived experts are still going to show up for change. And when the moment comes where, you know, the right administration is here and there's work to be picked up on and maybe even to be filled back, I believe that'll be not only us and all of us in this room, but a new generation of advocates coming along as well to continue to support that.
To our funders too.
Yeah. That's your answer. Keep going.
Okay.
Hello. So one of the things I just really want to highlight is being here really gives me hope. Being here that amongst the panel, amongst the audience, amongst those who are watching from home, it gives me hope because people care, right? And to be honest with you, everybody is attacking this thing, is attacking this problem from various angles I would have never thought about before today, to be completely transparent with you. And I want to say it gives me hope because nobody is giving up. The fact that we came together in this room, the fact that we're able to converse about how are we attacking this problem, the fact that we have some solutions to this problem, multiple solutions to this problem, it gives me hope that it's real. It's not just a false dream. Oftentimes, you know, just in life, we're told false dreams of, hey, you could do this, hey, you could do that. But then as soon as you try to do it, there's always a glass ceiling there. Right now, I don't feel a glass ceiling. And I feel like our voices is being I'm sorry. I feel like our voices is being heard. And this is what gives me hope.
I think my hope shot will forever be my village. And the fact that now we're seeing like our village that has been in hiding for so long, it's always been there, right? We've always had families and aunties and big mamas and like all of those different things that kind of help and raise our community up together, that, you know, we were so fearful that it felt like our village kind of went into hiding, right? But now what we're seeing at a time right now is our village coming back out. We're pulling together our resources and pooling those resources amongst ourselves and saying, how can we help? Right? We're seeing leaders create other leaders and activists creating other activists. And like, this is just such a time for our community to stand, to collectively come together and kind of wreck stuff at the same time. And it's just really hopeful and beautiful to watch for me. And that will always be like my greatest hope in watching how our communities are coming together without the government, right? Understanding that like we definitely can't lean on you guys in 2025. So we had to kind of go back to the table and say, how can we lean on one another, right? And for us to make it through this without worrying about the outside. But that's always going to be like my greatest hope, and one of the things that I kind of love that's going on right now is our villages that's stepping up.
Okay, so I'll close us off. What gives me hope, I'm gonna just piggyback off what everybody pretty much said today, like being in this room and being in this space with people from different states, and different fields, but impacted the same way and passionate the same way to show up today and continue showing up. But what also gives me hope is something April touched on earlier about how there's so many voices like her. There's so many voices like myself, and sitting here as a 22-year-old, I started in this work at 15. So I'm coming up on 7 years, like being an advocate and demanding respect in this space. And what gives me hope is that when I was 15 years old, I was reviewing curriculums for the Department of Children and Families that I wasn't getting paid. I was not getting paid. I was not sitting in spaces having conversations about, listen, you need to sign my contract and you need to pay me for this work. But today, as the advocate that I am now, I'm not afraid to show up as my authentic self. I'm not afraid to tell you that the agenda that you want me to talk about, I came here with a completely different agenda, and I'm still gonna talk about it. So what gives me hope is knowing that, like, I've grown so much in this space, that I am very passionate and convicted in the things that I have to say, that I know someone is gonna listen. And I also know that there's so many more of you. Like, I have the privilege of working with so many other youth advocates who are growing up in this space and learning as well, and being able to teach them the things that I learned, so they don't have to go 7 years or 5 years without being compensated correctly. Because we could talk about that too. We could get into numbers, okay? Because sometimes they want to give you a little gift card. That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. So just knowing that sometimes it takes a little longer to like see the fruits of your labor, but I've been able to witness it firsthand, and being in this space and invited to this table today is a testament of that.
And I'll say I share all of that. I think I've been looking for every opportunity to not be silenced and to not retreat. We've made tremendous progress over the last few years in this space, and we're going to continue, and showing up here together, having all of you gives me major hope. And I would say that we're here because silence would be complicity. And we're here because these truths have got to be named, and we haven't retreated on the truths that we have the right to family, that we have the right to our own families, that we have the right to belong, to love, to be together, and that it is a human right of ours, a basic human right. And it's not conditional on income or on citizenship or on compliance, that right is inherent. And even though the United States might be refusing to participate in its own human rights review, I want to be really clear that that refusal does not erase the responsibility. And the world is watching as we sit here across from the United States. Parents are watching, children are watching, all of us are watching. And so hopefully the US will look in the mirror and start to correct these harms that have been going on decade after decade after decade. But as long as they persist, so will we. So thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Thank you. There's so much work ahead, and we look forward to partnering with even more of you.
Yeah, everybody's straight, you know.